Hello, today we're going to start our conversation on teams and team process. Now, there's a lot more to having a team within an organization than just the additional capacity that it gives you. Obviously, if you're one person working away on something and you can get to the point where you need assistance, right? It's something more than just what one person can do, and that's certainly one of the benefits of a team structure. However, good teams actually produce synergistic results. By that I mean, in the context of teams, one and one becomes three, not one and one becoming two. And a lot of this comes from the way that the individuals in the team interact with each other. Good team structures have complementary skill sets among different people. Having multiple different perspectives often drives a more objective viewpoint. Um, Different people are good at different things, and combining those skills and those talents really can improve the quality in an organization and absolutely have a positive effect on the productivity. You see greater innovation, right? One of the things that happens in good teams is that ideas kind of bounce off each other and grow in a way that you couldn't get, singly. Because of many of these aspects, you find that they're less expensive in an organization as opposed to just individual contributions or individual contributors. Teams actually reduce operating costs. They tend to increase the commitment to the organizational mission. And we'll talk about some of those aspects of teams as we get going, and definitely create an increased sense of ownership over the issues or the areas that the teams are participating in. For an individual to be to be asked to participate in a team is often a sign of support within the organization and certainly from your leadership. It helps you enhance your problem solving skills and your knowledge and your way of navigating interpersonal dynamics. When you have to work with numerous different people on a team, you're not going to see eye to eye with them necessarily. So you have to figure out, how do you continue to move forward and how are you successful in a team environment. Often teams have people come in from different parts of the organization. So that gives you kind of exposure to some broader areas within the organization than you would normally. Many people that are picked for certainly cross-functional teams and special projects and things like that, it's often an early step that your management that you work for thinks fairly highly of you and is potentially grooming you for a promotion. And this is often one of the first steps along that road. And one of the real reasons that teams kind of have the value in that synergistic output and kind of the zest in them and stuff is because people get involved and they feel that they're part of something bigger than just themselves. And in fact, when you look at human motivation overall, the way that you tap into people giving their all, usually in the workplace, either has to do with self-esteem or it has to do with self-actualization. And self-actualization is entirely the being part of something bigger than oneself, legacy, all of those other kinds of pieces. And team structures tap into that fairly well. Now we're going to talk about types of teams, stages of team development, some team building activities. Next time we'll do roles and responsibilities and performance and evaluation. So teams can be either the way you create them or kind of what they're targeted at, right? So for example, you can have a process improvement team that's self-managed. You could have a cellular special project team, okay? Or any of those various different combinations that they're showing there. One aspect, as I said, has to do with kind of how you manage the organization and kind of how the team is pulled together. The other has to do with kind of how it approaches the work that it's doing. Now, choosing people on a team come from finding people that have the requisite knowledge that you need for the work that's being done. Obviously, they have to have some time available to do so. In many cases, because teams are making decisions about things, there's a level of authority that's required within organizations, and obviously the requisite technical skills. You'll find team membership is usually best between 4 and 7 members. Now, obviously, you can go a little less and you can go a little more. When you go on the low side, it's kind of hard to get that synergistic thing going. When you go above, it becomes more difficult to kind of um, keep everybody together and prevent the team from kind of breaking off into little subgroups, sort of things. And you'll find that often, certainly long-term teams, so very long-term, like multi-year projects, you'll often change the team members over the course of the project because the skills and what's required at one stage could be very, very different than the next, and then, you know, the follow-on stage. So you may in fact be changing those that are in, either entirely or some subsection of the team as time goes along. Um, Competencies are usually identified through the knowledge, experience, skills, aptitude, and attitude, right? So knowledge tends to be formalized learning, experience is actually doing it. Skills are very specific aspects that kind of are an intersection between knowledge and experience, and it's you know, like how to use this particular CNC machine, how to operate this kind of a lathe, things like that. There's also soft skills as well, for sure. And a lot of the interpersonal dynamic stuff and personal leadership and things like that are also skills. They're often referred to as soft skills. But that's also an important piece in identifying the competencies required for the team. And then the last two, aptitude and attitude, are related, but certainly different. So aptitude has to do with kind of a natural inclination. There are some of us who are naturally mechanically inclined. We can usually take things apart and figure out how they work and kind of put them back together. There are others that just for the life of them can't figure out to do that. That doesn't make one group smarter than the other. It just shows a different aptitude, right? There are some people that have an aptitude for sports or music or all kinds of things. Not everybody is that way. Aptitude is really, really important because it kind of gives you the basis through which, on which an individual builds, right? So based on their aptitude, you know, they build knowledge, experience, and skills on top of that in a particular capacity. Usually you choose a path in life kind of based on aptitude, right? I tend to be kind of good at this. We tend to like things that we're good at and tend to not like things we're not good at. So aptitude is certainly tends to be fairly directional. And then attitude has everything to do with how you look at things. And, you know, am I positive? Am I negative? You know, we all spend time in both sides. Where's our inclination? Do we go quickly negative? Are we fairly resilient and kind of try to see the positive? Attitude can be a huge, huge determinant and asset in a team. Positive attitude spreads, same as negative attitude spreads. So it's a very key thing that the leadership of a team has to pay attention to. You can also use tools like Myers-Briggs or DISC or Brinkman or any of the various other personality assessment tools. I don't know with your familiarity with them. They are covered in the textbook in a little more in some detail. Basically, they identify personality types. So just for illustration, Myers-Briggs identifies 16 different personality types. So basically, everybody in the world fits into one of these 16 types. And you determine based on answering a series of questions. I think it's 72 questions. You can actually look this up online and take a Myers-Briggs test for free. And then it will give you a 4-letter designation, and that 4-letter designation is the indication of your personality type. Now, there's no right or wrong personality types. There's no good or bad personality types. They're just different. Now, there are some that are very different from each other, and then there are some that are not so different from each other. One of the things that you would use a tool like that for in team selection is, for the most part, you don't want to put incompatible personality types together. There may be a case to be made for it in a specific circumstance, but generally speaking, that's asking for having personality problems. which you usually don't want to cultivate in a team. So often what you want to do is you want to pick people that have complementary personality types, because they will tend to be more compatible with each other. And that compatibility will make for smoother interpersonal dynamics, and it will certainly help you, certainly from a leadership standpoint, manage the attitudes within the team itself. So here's just, we talked about this already. So all teams go through this development phase, right? So you go through forming, storming, norming, and performing, right? And you will progressively move through them. How long you're at any one particular stage does vary. And then even once you move through to 4, you won't stay there permanently without there being some ongoing team maintenance activities that happen. So forming, everybody's formed up, anxious, new experience. It's kind of an exciting piece. Stage 2, you start to, if you're going to have personality issues or conflicts, they start to kind of come out. For most individuals that haven't worked on teams before, it can be a bit of a challenge to make that transition, because normally most people are in roles where they're individual contributors, right? Basically, you're evaluated on the job that you do. As a team, it's not so much about you, it's about the team itself. In many ways, this is like being a manager, right? Where, being a manager is not about what you do, it's about what your team does. And in the team itself, as a team member, it's kind of like that too, right? It's not about you, the individual, so much as it is about the team overall. People have difficulty making that transition because most of their lives, certainly through school and all kinds of other parts, they're used to the individualistic me, myself, and I focus. And then making the change for it not being about you necessarily, but being about the team, it is a bit of a stretch for some folks, but it's an absolutely necessary thing to be able to do in order to be able to move to a performing stage. You'll see in stage 3 is when you kind of wrap up any of these conflicts, right? People start to kind of figure out what's expected of them. You usually, by this point, you start to get some positive signs. You may not have results yet per se, but some positive signs that are supportive, so that you really can kind of mature and the team is performing and functioning well. And that's great. What happens over time is there's things that happen that will kind of pull away at that, which is why there's ongoing team maintenance activities that need to take place that we'll talk about shortly. So there's 2 things that teams will do. There's task-related things, right, which has to do with what it is that the team's supposed to do. So if we were tasked with improving a particular flowchart process, the things that we do to move towards that goal, right? So flowcharting and then doing interviews with people and, trying to create a variety of potential new process looks to see what they might look like. That's all task type stuff, right? Which is kind of the meat and potatoes, if you will, of what the team itself would be working on. But it's very, very important to always have some of this maintenance type. And this has to do with preserving and enhancing the relationships and the communication between the various people on the team. And maintenance type stuff is really, really, really important to do. Otherwise, what happens is barriers naturally kind of come up between one person and the next. And the more those barriers come up, the more you remove some of the synergistic values that you tend to get out of a team. So common maintenance type things, breaking bread with your team, right? So you will bring food in, or you do a potluck, or you'll go out for dinner, or things like that. Very, very common things. Humans tended to respond quite well to sharing a meal with each other. One of the things is that conversations get going, and particularly you'll find if you've been involved in any of these, one of the common things that those that are organizing this do is you try to make sure that you put people together that don't normally have a lot of interaction with each other. And it isn't to make people feel isolated. It's actually to get them, because most people will start to talk to some degree, even if they're fairly shy, and they'll discover things about these other people. Oh, I didn't know you like that. Or I didn't know you had kids. I have kids too. And like what happens is people discover the commonality. And the commonality helps break those barriers down, which is one of the reasons why the maintenance type stuff is so important. You can do other creative things. I had the good privilege of working for 13 years for Research in Motion, which people may have known as BlackBerry. And the various different teams we were on were really good at the maintenance type stuff. So we did all kinds of very fun things. It wasn't just going out for dinner. We would do, I can remember one event where we had dinner in a winery and they did like a murder mystery thing right there while we were eating dinner. So they were, they had people walking around that were playing the various different parts in the murder mystery, and they were talking to us at the tables. And it was really quite entertaining. And then the next day we did our own version of like The Amazing Race, where there were all these limos out front, and the various different teams were into them with their envelopes and on to the next thing. And those things were great because they really brought people together. And as I said, usually the subgroups that we ended up putting together were people that were not those that would daily interact with each other. And pulling together for a common cause, for something you're having fun with, kind of really brings people together and it energizes them. Now, one of the best ways to deal with problems in teams is to prevent them. And that often starts at the beginning, right? So when you kick off, you often go for a get together that's all about kind of establishing where you start from. So norms, which is basically rules, and it's essentially the culture of the team that you're trying to create. You'll talk about roles and what do one person do versus another and how do they interact with each other. You'll often engage in activities referred to as icebreakers. So commonly at the beginning of this course, I do one of those as well, where we have people talk about where they come from, why they're taking this course, and then they'll share something about themselves personally. Right. So I think for the past couple of semesters, I've been using, something that you thought would be easy to do until you tried it, right? And it's designed so that somebody will say that, and then somebody else will hear the answer and they go, "Oh, I've tried that too, and I found that really difficult." Right? Again, it's designed to break the barriers between people and improve the connections and the communication. All teams have to make decisions from time to time. And usually one of the things that you said at the beginning is the expectation of how, as an organization or as a team, we're going to make decisions. Now, you can have it being a unilateral, everybody has to agree to the same thing. Most teams have some kind of a voting structure, whether it's simple majority or 2/3 or something like that. Most would pick that kind of a structure. Now, even a voting structure, if it's 2/3, for example, if you didn't agree but everybody else or most of everybody else did, and that's the way the team is going, outside of the structure of the team itself, you are 100% supporting that decision. That's how that works, because the decision is not about you, the individual. The decision is about the team as a collective. And if the team has spoken, that's the path that everyone needs to follow.